New larger garbage cans making their way to Rockford. Some community members worry the containers might be too big to handle.
23 News reporter Sydney Stoffregan talks trash with one city leader who says they are working to find suitable options for everyone.
That will increase the amount of recycling in the community.
Street after street, residents receive a 96-gallon garbage can and 65-gallon recycling bin from the city in an effort to reduce the cost of garbage collection. After researching other communities, Robert Willamy with the city says these cans increase collection efficiency by 25%.
It increases the efficiency of collection and reduces the amount of worker injuries. It also reduces the amount of workers the garbage collection staff need on a route to do the same amount of collection.
Some residents worry the size of the cans might be too much to handle, especially for those with physical limitations. Eric Brown with RAMP says he looks forward to working with the city to find a solution.
Advocate for yourself. Understand that if you are running into an issue related to your disability, there are probably other people in the city who are running into that same issue. Please reach out to the city. Encourage them to come up with a reasonable accommodation process.
Willamy suggests reaching out to caregiving organizations to lend a hand. He says the size of these cans will be worth it in the long run.
We sympathize with those that do have challenges with moving any sort of garbage cart, and we also like to let them know that there are resources available to them to help them with garbage collection if needed.
Working for you in Rockford, Sydney Stoffregan, 23 News.
Brown encourages following in the steps of Freeport, which created a physically disabled refuse service to help disabled residents get their 96-gallon trash cans to the curb.